Hello and welcome to today's video. It's going to be a bit of an unusual one. I am sat outside my front door looking around at my garden thinking, some pretty flowers around. I wonder if that could be inspiration, because I'm going to be honest with you, this time of year I find it a little bit difficult to get me vooming. We've had several weeks of true British summer, read that as rain and wind, but right now I've got sun, I've got a few clouds floating by. I want a photograph, I'm determined to do something, but I don't really know where to go. So I thought, I've got some nice flowers in my garden. I'm not going to do macro, I'm a bit crap at that, but I have got a macro lens. I've got some filters. It might be interesting to get some intentional camera movement stuff going. For those of you that are interested, this is what I'm blathering on about. Let me show you some of it in practice. Now this bluebell wood had the floor that was so cluttered, I really had not a lot of choice except to do ICM. This autumnal shot was taken in the same woods. At the bottom, the red is in fact dying bracken. What I really needed to be careful of is that I actually got the edges sorted so I didn't have half a tree sticking out. Those last shots were taken on tripod, but this was handheld. This is in fact a decaying tree, and I've done a simple downward swoop, and in post-processing I've worked on the contrast, the texture, clarity, and also the brightness. Back onto the tripod now and into my kitchen for a shot of the first tulip of the season. It's okay, but it doesn't really float my boat. Now today's idea was to let the wind do the movement as opposed to me with my lens. But I suppose that makes it not intentional camera movement. I shall call it wind movement. My object is to do something a little bit different to what I normally do. Straight up and down. Yeah, it's okay. Tedious. Now, having just whinged about the English weather, I do need to say one thing. Right now, every single day on our news channels, we're seeing about the wildfires that are ravaging so many places on the planet. So I acknowledge that English weather will do nicely in comparison. Okay, this is my setup. This is far too high, so I'm going to have to look for my background, because what I don't want is the neighbour's fence. I'm going to either have to try and edge things up so I can go up to the sky, or I'm going to go in and get a background. I might need somebody else to hold it up for me. And then it's a case of fiddling around until you get the flowers that you like the look of, the background that you like the look of, and adjusting the time. Now the problem is when you're relying on the wind for your ICM as opposed to you doing intentional movements, you're actually relying on something that's inconsistent. So you can have periods where nothing happens and then it just goes bonkers. Weirdly with this setup I'm getting something vaguely interesting. I won't say pleasing, but the background is too complex. So I'm going to jump indoors and I'm going to go and get a backdrop. Now on the right, the dark background actually simplifies the scene and draws the eye into what you want to be looking at, which is the flowers in this case. Yes, okay, I bought myself a final background. However, if I'm honest, a dark piece of card would have worked just as well. This was my general workflow for the next 30 minutes. Good gracious, forgive the inelegance you're about to see here. Come on, wind. That's it. Keep going, wind. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, maybe a bit more than that would be good. One of the issues I had was that the 10-second timer was far too long, so I had to start to get creative to kind of make things happen. Is that cheating? Is kicking it cheating? I think it probably is. And I probably buggered it up. Let's have a look. Yeah, kicking it's not good. Oh, that's all right though. I figured for me to sit in front of a bunch of flowers for about 40 minutes shooting away, I must be going stir crazy. Right, this time I'm going to have a crack at this with some agapanthus. The upside is they are more wavy because they've got longer stems. Sometimes you just have to give up and you haven't got enough arms, so you have to get a willing volunteer in. Getting some interesting stuff though.
And she stopped me watching the cricket.
Oh dear. Working on multiple blooms didn't really do well until I went up to a single one and I could get that board behind so that I could actually get a little bit of darkness. But just like any reflective surface, it needs to be aimed downwards, so I wasn't actually kind of getting the glare in the front of my camera, but also it really looked like it isolated that flower quite well. I thought it might actually help if I were to just show you some of the basics of how I might edit something like this, but equally as important, how I might eliminate a lot of my shots. So first of all, I go through and I will rate them, gradually refining it down via the star system so that I can choose ones that I really like the look of. So I'm going to have a look at this one here today. I double click it and I open it in Adobe Camera Raw. I'm going to bring down those blacks. I'm going to bring down those shadows, up the clarity a little bit, not too much, and the texture. Let me show you what difference those make. The texture here, let's take that up. I'm going to put that maybe at about 1918-ish. The clarity itself, if you do that, as you can see, that has quite a harsh effect. So I'm going to take that up only a little bit, so maybe something like 5 at this initial stage. Then jump into the main Photoshop itself. So I'm going to actually have a look at this as a square, because that's going to eliminate quite a bit of the stuff I don't want to see. I think that works here. Do you know what? I might even get rid of some of that stuff at the bottom. It's just a little bit distracting. I'm going to actually look at my curves, and I'm going to bring down those blacks quite a bit, but I'd also like to add a little bit of vibrance to the blues and the whites there, but not vast amounts. Okay, that really is quite punchy. I like that there. I'm going to, whoa, that's bringing everything down on the darks there. I want to be a little bit more selective. Okay, so if I accept that, I'm going to layer and I'm going to flatten. I'm going to then open via filter, Camera Raw, because I can have a bit of a fiddle in this. This here will add a new layer mask. I'm going to think about putting in a linear gradient just in here at the moment, because that's a little bit too bright, that area for me. I am going to take down the exposure a bit, but I'm also going to take down those blacks again and those shadows in that area. But don't forget, it's going to have affected the blues here. So I just need to subtract. I need to subtract a color range, and I'm going to go in and remove it from the blues there. So it should be only affecting the background areas. Therefore, when I go back and have a little bit of a fiddle here, it shouldn't be affecting, that's better, it shouldn't be affecting those blues or those white. I'm going to do exactly the same thing at the bottom here, create a new mask. I'm going to do a linear gradient, and I'm going to come in from the bottom of the shot here, rather like that. I'm going to pop that exposure down. I'm going to pop the blacks down, and I'm going to pop the shadows down as well. So I'm going to subtract, first of all, as I did beforehand, that colour range, and I'm going to go into that colour range dash. It's actually done this bit here as well. So I'm going to add back in. So I'm going to add back in via my brush, and I'm going to just pop that back in down the bottom there. So I've just effectively done a mask, removed it from this area here, and re-added it into here. I'm going to go in now and choose a new new mask, and I'm going to do a brush just up the whites a little bit there, just to see what that looks like. And I'm just going to put some of that back in around this area here, just to kind of brighten it slightly. I'll go around a little bit this area here, but also I want to do it in the middle, so I make that green pop a little bit. I'm going back to this top right hand corner, which means now I'm applying an edit universally. I'm going to go down to Color Mixer here and just have a look and see what happens. If I up the saturation of the blues. We know the blues are going to be a dominant colour here. Far too much. I might make it pop slightly here. I'm going to go to effects, and I'm just going to play around with a vignette.
because again, that's going to draw my eye. I don't like any vignette that you can really go, oh, they've put a vignette on. So I might just go for something like this. If I turn that off and on, off and on. Clearly, if I were going to keep this particular photo, I do an awful lot more work on it. The essentials that I want to do are to darken down any area that I do not want to draw attention to potentially make other areas pop, and I can do that in Adobe Camera Raw, or if you're using Lightroom, you've got a very similar setup. And I would suggest, instead of going exposure, think about having a look at whites and maybe highlights as well, and then focusing in on the colour. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to intensify it, or do you want to make it a little bit more luminant? And just working with that, drawing the eye to where you want it to be.
I hope you've enjoyed this video, even if it's a little bit different. When this goes out, I shall be somewhere else completely, trying to capture some interesting scenes of dead volcanoes.
In the meantime, I'd love to know whether you prefer the shots with more definition or less definition. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you next time. Take care.